I would like to now talk about what have I got it labeled here? Hoses, lines, cables, tubes, and pipes. So we're just going to start off here. We got cooling hoses, right? There's cooling hoses in the whole car, and the cooling hoses all have clamps, and the clamps sometimes are not as tight as they would seem to be, and you'll get leaking from around there, around the joint. So rather than just tighten up a hose clamp, always flush it with a little bit of oil to make it work, back it off, and then tighten it down. Don't just start tightening it. Back it off first, get some threads clean, get some oil moving through there, through the nut and the screw, and then tighten it up, or on the worm gear. This is especially true on MGAs, MGBs, midgets, where you got a heater box and the hose goes over a pipe, and the clamp around there can come loose, and this hose can squirt into the inside of the heater box past the pipe that comes out. It can go inside the heater box and make you think that your heater matrix has a hole in it, but it isn't. You just got to tighten the clamps. So, and that's a leak that you can't see. It's an internal kind of a leak. So
Hey, John.
yes.
Yeah. Talk about types of clamps.
Oh, well, that's something more down your line. Yeah, Jubilee clamps. Jubilee clamps are the clamps that we usually see, those and band clamps. I'm right, am I not? The dual wire
Yeah.
ones? Yeah, those are the Jubilee clamps. And the original ones all look, pretty nice. The new ones look like a crummy Chinese copy of the original Jubilee clamps. Um, and then there's worm clamps that we're all used to, that you just get on and just keep tightening until it goes tight. Those are real ugly, but they're very effective. They're very wonderful. Band clamps are very critically sized. You've got to have exactly the right size band clamp to tighten down on the hose. And God knows the hose that you're using today isn't the same outside diameter as the hose that the factory was using. Therefore, the band clamp is either too large or too small. You can always put a wrap of electrical tape underneath the band clamp, that will disappear into the color of the hose and make it a little bit larger in circumference so you can actually get your band clamp tight. So, Fred, what have I missed?
Well, I like the original MGA clamps. It's like a band clamp, but it's got a little screw, like uh, I guess it's a Whitworth screw. It's a coarse thread with a cheesehead uh, top on head on it, and I love those things. They work just perfect. They're just the right size. Some of them have a split on the backside. Some of them are flat. I think it's the 1500 was pretty much flat, and the 1600s went to a split type. But
Interesting.
the other thing I read recently was somebody was using silicone hoses with these band clamps, the new type band clamps, and we really had to squeeze those things really, really, really tight for them not to leak. Whereas the regular rubber hoses, those take just a certain amount of pressure and then they seal off. You know, but the
Interesting. Thank
silicone
you.
really a lot of pressure.
I don't have any experience with the silicone hoses at all. None. I like those old John Bull hoses you could see the fabric of the canvas on the inside of the hose. T-types and the MGAs had those, real heavy duty. Now there is just regular hoses. But a cautionary here to everyone with an MGA or MGB is you must have an accordion hose at the top because the engine shifts left and right as you're accelerating and decelerating. Not much, but it moves. And if it's a rigid hose between the thermostat housing and the radiator, then um, uh, yeah, just background noise. Anyway, um, sorry. Anyway, that the yeah, those old hoses were kind of cool, and I always use black hoses. Never use red hoses. The red hoses just don't belong in an MG. So, um, the 1977 through 1980 MGBs have a cooling hose that goes from and an MGC and an Austin America for that matter have a hose that goes from the expansion tank right up to the very topmost point of the radiator. So those are important. Oil pressure hoses. There was a group of them, what, 10, 15 years ago, that when you tighten them up, the oil, these flexible oil hoses that go from the engine to the firewall on the T-type and the MGA and the MGB, and the midgets don't use one. Midget 1500s don't either. I think they've got just a oil pressure switch there. Anyway, the other cars, they have these flexible lines, and as long as the line isn't disturbed, it'll last a long, long time. But as soon as you take it off the car and then put a different twist into it, they can fracture the old ones. And the new ones are good again. There was a period of time that oil pressure line, 476, 060 or something rather than Moss number, they fractured on installation. But that seems to be a problem from a long time ago. We've got vacuum hoses. And the difference between a regular hose and a vacuum hose is the vacuum hose has a larger thickness, wall thickness on the hose so that the vacuum inside doesn't cause it to collapse. In other words, if you used a half-inch heater hose to go from your intake manifold to your servo on your 75 through 80 MGB, and just put the heater hose there, that heater hose will get sucked shut. So you have to put a spring on the inside of the hose to keep it open. That's an old, just a mechanics trick. That's wonderful. You can take a half-inch heater hose, take a half-inch screen door spring, stretch the spring out a little bit, be so cautious stretching a spring. When you bite it in the vise, that's the one end that's being held. You don't want it to come loose when you're pulling on it because it will come back and snap you in the knuckles and hurt a lot. Let me tell you. So grab it really tightly and then stretch it out. When you stretch it, the diameter gets a little smaller. Put a little bit of grease on it or something to slip right inside a hose. And if you wanted to tie a pretzel with a piece of half-inch heater hose, it would never kink. It can't. So it's a real cheap trick to make those hoses that go from the heater box to the heater valve on the cylinder head. You can buy a formed hose. You can buy it. Sure, absolutely. But you can also make one with just a piece of half-inch heater hose and that screen door spring. Oil filter pipes. So on the T-types, on the early T-types that had the vertical filters, there are these rigid brass pipes with banjo fittings on the end that you have to crank down so tight so that they don't leak. The banjos are huge, and they go back to another pipe at the introduction of the MGA. They lost those pipes in the T-types once they went to a horizontal oil filter. But in the MGA, they pick that pipe up again and go from the back of the block into the heater. Excuse me, wrong. From the back of the block, the oil outlet at the back of the block into the oil filter assembly. You can take that pipe off, put fittings there, and run an oil cooler out in front if you so choose. Lots of MGBs have that done. But the MGB dropped their oil cooler in around 1975, just as a standard for all cars. And they used then what was a flexible, but after it's been on your car for 30, 40, 50 years, it's pretty rigid, a flexible hose to go from the back of the block into the heater, into the oil filter assembly. Then in 1980, they made it just like that MGA was. Back in 1956, they went back to a pipe and a great big banjo bolt, and those work really well. There's no need They look cool. There's no need for an oil cooler on our cars, not unless you're really, really campaigning that car hard out on the expressway or you're putting a lot of heat, a lot of miles on it. I don't think the oil coolers are advantageous. I've never been able to draw any correlation between engine failure and lack of oil coolers. As a matter of fact, the late model engines, MGB engines, run so much better and longer than the earlier ones did because they're so lightweight. They only have three rings. The 1963 MGB had five rings. Just everything's lighter. It just spins. It's nice. There are vacuum tubes. There are vacuum tubes that go from the intake manifold or from the carburetor, depending on the year, down to the vacuum advance unit on the distributor. That's a vacuum tube. And if that vacuum tube is broken or open, not hooked up, left to the atmosphere, you're either going to lean out mixtures, you're not going to get the advantage of the vacuum advance off the distributor. That replaced a line. I talk about that later. That rubber line, rubber hose tube. That's what I've got it listed as here is a tube. The vacuum tube, the reason I call it the vacuum tube is because I'm talking about the early MGAs with a rigid, tiny, one eighth of an inch, if that capillary line that goes from the bottom of the rear carburetor over to the vacuum advance unit on the distributor with a flame trap in it. Oh my gosh, horrible things to try to fit into place and have look nice when you're all done. They finally went to just a rubber line with the MGBs later on. You have air injector tubes. An air injector tube is 1968 through 1980 on all models, where the air is injected into the cylinder head by an air pump to complete the combustion so you don't have unburned hydrocarbons traveling down the tailpipe to screw up the atmosphere. Almost all those have been removed. Socket set screw 7/16 20 goes right into the holes on everything, not the MGC, of course, but all the rest of them from the midget 1500 back to a 68 MGB or midget 7/16 20 thread works real nicely. Then we also have demister tubes. That's a tube. The dictionary says a tube is a hollow, elongated cylinder, especially one to convey fluids. But in this case, the demister tube takes warm air. There's no defroster in our cars. Never ever make that assumption or get confused. It's a demister at best, right? It'll blow some air. The only BMC product I ever drove that had a good heater was in Austin, America. Oh my gosh, was that great! And TR7s, we don't talk about Triumphs here much, but TR7s have a wonderful heating system. You get nice and warm on the inside of the car. So anyway, we've got demister tubes. We've got fuel lines. Fuel lines run from the fuel tank up to the fuel pump on a TD. On a TD, the fuel line that goes from the fuel pump to the tank grounds the tank so that the electrical switch to tell you if you got 3 gallons or less left operates. So the tank is grounded no other way than through the copper line that runs all the way from it up to the fuel pump. So if you cut that line and put in an inline fuel filter, which is not original, but certainly a good idea to have one somewhere, you will lose your electrical contact to the ground, to the tank, and your fuel warning light won't work again. So interesting stuff. They didn't use fuel lines as part of any electrical circuit after that. Uh, well, the MGAs did, I guess. Those are also grounded to the tank, and the MGBs were also right up through 64. I'm wrong. They did use the fuel pump as the ground on those. Anyway, you have to be careful about cutting those lines. If you're going to put a filter into a TD or a TF, best place is usually between the pump and the carburetors. It's I, I just talked to a guy this past week who put one on the bottom of his TD gas tank, but oh my gosh, every time you take it off, you get gasoline that runs out and up your arm, and it's a mess. It's just a mess. So put the filter up where you don't have to lie down on the ground to change it. Get it up underneath the bonnet someplace. Same with all the other cars. A lot of the cars came through without filters. And then when they did start coming through with filters, they were canisters, uh, steel canisters. Is it dirty? Who knows? So when you're going to replace the filter, always get just a cheap inline see-through filter that you can just take a look at. You can tell if you're starting to get some varnish or chunks of stuff into it. And the fuel pump's got a screen in it that takes out great big stuff, but it's the little tiny stuff that will cause the carburetors to silt up and not work correctly. You've got evaporative loss control lines. Evaporative loss control was introduced in 1970. That's the charcoal canister. So any air going in and out of the fuel tank goes through the condensing canister in the upper right-hand corner of the fender, and then from there up to the charcoal canister, so that any fumes maybe will condense and drip back into the tank, or the fumes that do get out will get adsorbed by the charcoal canister, and then washed with fresh air once the engine starts running. So that's evaporative loss control. There's also another line that goes from the carburetors, from the carburetor float bowls, over to the charcoal canister. And this is because when you turn the car off, the gasoline now today it boils sometimes, but it certainly expands because it gets hot with all that high underbonnet temperature. So the air fuel sitting on top of the float bowl's got to go someplace. It goes over to the charcoal canister, and that air fuel mixture is adsorbed by the charcoal. And then once the engine's operating, you wash that charcoal with fresh air and combust the little bit of air fuel that is wafting out of that charcoal container.
Hey, John,
Yeah,
yeah, regarding that on the like the HIFs, and maybe even before that, that line coming off the top of the float bowls has to go up and then over to the canister. Because if you route it down below and it gets any fuel in there, it can't breathe. You
this
don't get
is
that atmosphere.
thank you. Thank you. I just did one. I just talking about the one I did at the local shop, and all the hoses were connected to the wrong place. And I pointed out to the guy, I said, we're going to take a long length, and we're going to zip tie it to one of the heater bands so that no part of the line from the carburetor over to the charcoal canister is lower than the canister or the carburetors. Because if you get a dip in it, oh my gosh, this starts to there's some more weirdnesses that happen even after this. So in 1973, then we have the PCV system. Well, actually, PCV system starts in 64, but um, in with the Smith's PCV valve that sits on top of the intake manifold that was demanded by the state of California. They had such bad smog in Los Angeles. So they got a PCV valve that burns all the vapors that come out of the engine that get past the rings, the blow by, all that stuff. That all gets swept into the intake manifold now and is combusted during the normal course of the engine operation. Um, so in 1968, that was the last year of the Smith's PCV valve. Looks like a great big mushroom on top of your intake manifold. Then they started ventilating the carburetors between the throttle disc and the air piston and kept that up right through 1980. That's a real nice system. Um, anyway, that Smith's PCV valve was replaced by the carburetor inlet ports, and then in 1973, an anti-run-on valve was added so that when you turn the car off It doesn't go bump up, bump up, bump up, bump up, bump for 20 seconds, tearing the shit out of the engine mounts and belching all kinds of unburned hydrocarbons into the atmosphere. So the anti-run-on valve is designed to starve the car for gasoline right at the point of shutoff. I felt the valve work today on a 73 MGB I was working on today, and that valve clicked 10 seconds after I turned the key off. That oil in there was under a lot of pressure. The car hadn't run for quite a while, but there's an anti-run-on valve that operates when the key is off and you have oil pressure, which is for several seconds only after you shut the car off, because the oil pressure is lost. In the case of the car today, that oil pressure was not lost for about 10 seconds. I heard that thing click pretty soundly, 10 seconds afterwards. So that valve can have all kinds of stuff go wrong with it. The charcoal canisters, the bottom of the screen breaks, and little tiny pieces of charcoal dance out of that and dance along a tube and dance into the anti-run-on valve. And then when the anti-run-on valve closes, which is just a diaphragm coming up against a seat, there's stuff in the way and it can't close. So the car diesels. It's a really nice system. Don't take that off. Don't take that off. That's a wonderful, wonderful system. Both the evaporative loss control system, it doesn't make the car run poorly unless there's another problem. And it keeps the atmosphere clean. It's really nice. In 1975, we have an EGR line. That's the line that runs the exhaust gas recirculation valve. Again, more emission stuff. It's a little tiny valve on the top of the intake and exhaust combination manifold using the Stromberg carburetors 75 through 1980. They leak. They almost always leak because they're exposed to extremely hot temperatures on the underside. The valves get corroded and garbaged up. Best thing to do is just close them off altogether with just a thick gasket. That's all. Anyway, that EGR line that's only on the MGBs from well, maybe on some of the midget 1500s, but from 1975 through 1980. We've got brake booster lines, and that's on an MGC. You got two come right from the intake manifold. That's where if you want to use half-inch heater hose for vacuum hose, you can put the spring down inside it and it will not collapse. It's really nice. We've got oil cooler lines. So these oil cooler lines have got the caps, the steel caps, and they're fitted onto an aluminum fitting on the oil cooler. And if you try to undo them, it'll twist the fitting right out of the oil cooler. So next time you say, well, I'm going to put a wrench on the bottom one, and I turn it, and if it comes apart, the threads are all garbaged. It is a nightmare. It's a mess. You don't have to go through any of that. All you need is a propane torch and a bucket of water with a bunch of rags in it, and you take your propane torch and heat up the nut that goes onto the oil cooler. Heat around him for I just full bore, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. He's smoking. He's really hot. Then you take a bunch of rags, I mean a bunch that have been in a 5-gallon pail of cold water, and pick it up and just press it right onto that joint. And it cools really quickly. Turn the rags once. It'll be hot. Get it as cold as you can, as quickly as you can. And then sometimes you swear that you could unscrew that nut by hand. The coefficient of expansion of the steel and the aluminum are so different that when they cool, when they quench, they pull away from each other. So you don't ever have to buy another new oil cooler again for having screwed up the threads. Get it nice and hot, quench it. You can buy stuff at Napa. It's like CO2 for making dry ice, that kind of idea. And you can spray it on a fitting, which again is chilling it, But I always found it's better to heat it up first with a torch. It's what I've always done, old fashioned.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
when you put it back together again, use anti-seize.
Yes. Yes. Anti-seize is rare, this rare stuff that boy, I caution everyone about using because it just creeps, it just gets on everything. But for wheel spinners, for the bolts in the rear axle and the front of the rear axle, for some of the bolts in the front suspension, yep, you use anti-seize and you can always get it apart. That refers to Volvos and Jags and Sunbeams and Triumphs. Uh, it's really, really good stuff. So we've got a capillary line for the mechanical temperature gauge. So the little bulb that goes into the radiator, like on the TDs, TCs, or goes into the engine on the TF and right through the MGBs through 67, there's a little tiny, tiny, tiny capillary line filled with ether. Not exactly ether, but something real close to it. And so when the bulb, which is inside the cooling system, gets hot, then the pressure increases, and there's a Bernoulli tube, I think that's correct, on the inside of the gauge with a gear, and so the needle, this tube, this brass tube, deforms because of the pressure in the engine from the heat, expanding the what I call it, not chloroform, but anyway, expanding that stuff. And it's if you cut that line, it smells like ether for a real short time, and then it never works again. You have to send it off to one of the gauge places. So just be really careful. Very often they're wound with wire so that the ambient temperature stays really even all the way along. Because if you get that capillary tube close to the exhaust manifold, anything like that, it'll heat it up and give you an incorrect reading. So we're going to talk about earth cables. Cables. Let's see, what is the cable? This is what,
John,
yeah,
this is Judd. Before you leave hoses, the oil cooler hose, some of the fuel line hoses from the, particularly from the carburetor to carburetor, but also from the pump to the carburetor on a TD, where the pump is where it's supposed to be. Um, and some other are braided steel clad rubber.
yes.
And I have heard two different theories on that. One is that that's really good because it's strong and blah, blah, blah. And the other is that it's really nice bling, but it doesn't do anything except hide the real hose from you so you can't tell if you got a problem. Do you have any comments on the braided steel hoses?
I only ever assumed that it was for the dissipation of heat, reflection and dissipation of heat, so that the line couldn't get too hot and boil the fuel. When those lines fail, it's not the banjo fittings on the end that fail, it's the tube between. So if you want to be really cool, you can grind the ends off where they're cinched down, crushed down, grind those off. You can then pull the barbed banjo fittings out of the end of those hoses. You can take that steel sleeve, push it together because it's like a Chinese finger puzzle, and replace that line. But now you got to use some hose clamps, and then you can cover those up a little bit with some black electrical tape. But you don't have to buy a whole $30, $40 new line. You can always just put the hose and hose clamps on if you want.
Hey, John, another thing about that, can you talk about ethanol proof rubber lines?
Not with any authority. Apparently, Gates makes a green hose. I think they co-opted the color to go with the modern psychology, but the Gates green hose is supposed to stand up against the ethanol. Some old hoses don't. Oh my
John?
The
gosh.
other thing about the one other thing about the old hoses is if they're over about probably 10 years old, they're probably beginning to crack and probably need to be replaced anyway. So don't let your hoses go too long without servicing them.
Thank you. That's especially true in the trunk of an MGB or a midget, where you've got a line that goes from the fuel tank to the condensing canister and from the condensing canister to the line that goes up front. Those lines crack, and then you're driving down the road and you smell gas and you think, oh, must be something in the engine that's leaking. But it's not. It's the air coming out of your trunk and getting into the inside of the cockpit is your windscreen pushes the air out of the way, and the air to replace it comes off the back of the car and through the trunk. So it's really common to have that gasoline smell. I failed to call on David Hay. I'm sorry, your hand's been up. Your arm must be ready to fall off. Your hand's been up for so long.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay. Just three quick questions. With regards to the oil cooler lines,
yes.
what is the current thought for using sealant for those threaded connections? What's the best sealant for that?
The threads don't seal. It's the ball. It's the ball and the
Okay, so
fitting that
you don't
seal.
need to put anything onto
No,
those.
no. But as Fred Horner said, this is one of those places where you use anti-seize
Okay.
between the steel line and the aluminum uh, oil cooler. Yep.
So years ago, I put a new oil cooler on my B, and from day one, it always weeped oil. And I just fixed that. This was years ago, decades ago, and I just fixed that with PTFE tape.
Okay.
But what I didn't know at the time, being young and not very schooled, was that when you use that white PTFE tape, it's not compatible with hydrocarbons.
Oh,
It's for water. It's for plumbing.
okay.
So when I took them off, that tape had turned dissolved into mush. It wasn't doing anything anyway.
Okay.
But nowadays I realized that they make about, I don't even know how many dozen different grades of PTFE tapes. They make it for the yellow stuff is for hydrocarbons, for natural gas lines, and they make stainless steel PTFE tape and stuff like that. But okay, I'm just curious as to what that answer was.
Yeah, but it there isn't one because it's not a sealing joint. It's not
Honestly,
it.
yeah, there's like that ball socket
Mhm.
flared.
And that's
So,
what
so if it leaks, you're not seated,
you're
I
not
get,
you haven't got it
or
tight,
the
haven't got it tight enough. Or there's a
yeah,
piece it's aluminum. That aluminum's pretty soft, so if there's a piece of junk in there, it'll push it'll push into the aluminum. But if you get both the sockets, the socket and the ball, real clean, and put some anti-seize on it, and use two wrenches, 15/16 and a 1 inch usually, one on the cooler, one on the line, and get it as tight as you dare. It won't leak.
okay. Hey, you made that comment about the vacuum line on the distributor.
What
Uh,
year?
uh, well, specifically 69 on a C, and it has the hard line. It
It
has
does. The C still has that hard line. Oh my gosh. Okay.
69C has the hard line
Okay.
from the rear of the carburetor to the
Yeah.
vacuum cap.
Yeah.
Uh, it looks to me like it's steel because
Could
it has
be.
mild corrosion on the
Okay.
surface.
All right. Well, copper and brass don't corrode. So yeah,
Yeah. Should I just replace that outright with a flexible line
you
proactively?
can, or you can just clean that up and make sure that the little short pieces of tubing that go between the carburetor and the line and between the line and the vacuum
Yeah,
fan. are okay.
small hose to the carb,
Yeah,
and then it mates up with a rubber right angle fitting on the vacuum capsule, which that fitting was cracked completely in
sure.
two and
But you can
replaced by a piece
always
of tape.
replace it with just a single line, and as long as it's, not dangling all over, looks good, does the job.
I don't think it has a valve in it. You said something about a valve on a
No,
bead.
flame trap, a flame
Flame trap.
trap.
Flame trap.
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
see one of
Okay.
that. Okay. Hey, and why do they call them Jubilee clips?
Brad? I
What?
don't know. Because
I've been wondering that
they
for
were
years.
invented in the when was the when was Victoria's Diamond Jubilee? Maybe it was that year. I don't know. Beats me.
I thought it was just a brand name, but I don't know.
Could be
Oh, okay.
like Kleenex.
Why is
Yeah.
that related to the Queen's Jubilee? Why would you
Well,
call them
no,
that?
I just
Oh,
came up
okay.
with that. I don't know.
But I watch enough British YouTube that they always call them Jubilee clips, and I'm like, boy, why do they call
Yeah.
them that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I was calling it a crescent wrench.
Yeah. 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 Yep. All right. I was talking about earth cables. On the T type, there's a cable that goes from the battery to the body and from the body to the engine. And that makes that gets the battery connected there. And then on the MGAs, all of a sudden the length of the cables is dramatically longer because you're going all the way from behind the seats all the way up to the very front of the car, and you just want to make sure that those cables are protected. They're not raw. You can't see the copper underneath them because if you can, you put a jack stand there someday and discharge your whole battery. By the time you get the car jacked back up again, and it runs right next to the fuel line, so it's not a good place to have a dead short. That kind of stuff hardly ever happens. But earth cables are often missing. They're often misplaced. Somebody gets confused about where they're supposed to go. But on the MGA through the 74 MGB, they go in the left front motor mount and go from the frame to the engine. You just look at it and say, am I connected from the frame to the engine? Then it was someone's great idea in 1975 to put them on the right hand side of the gearbox mount where you can't see if it's hooked up or not. You just don't you don't know it's there. And they kept it there until 1970 till the end of 79. And then in 1980, they ground the engine to the frame of the car right up at the back of the head. Just first time ever. It just anyway. Always make sure you got a good ground strap because that'll the ground cable. I could have put straps in my descriptions here too. Throttle cables. Throttle cables. Of course, T-types don't have a throttle cable. They get rods. But as soon as we pick up the MGA and the Bug Eye Sprite and the MGCs and all the rest, they all have a throttle cable. And those throttle cables, if they're underneath another hose, can change the length of the inner cable by changing the length of the outer cable. So when the bonnet closes and it presses down on something, was the engine start to race? You can see all kinds of weird stuff, but the cable should not have any interference to it at all. The throttle cable, and it should be well lubricated. Um, Choke cables, I came upon that today. 68 through 76 MGB. You got to reach up behind the dash and put a nut about 3 times as thick as a piece of notebook paper on a real coarse thread and then tighten it up. So when you're replacing a choke cable, um, you can make this case on the steel dash cars too, but go to the hardware store and get a nut, just a big, thick American nut, like half-inch 20, 7/16 20, that'll fit the new cable. And then when you put the new cable up in behind the dash, you can actually get a wrench onto that nut because the nut that comes with a new choke cable is unsatisfactory. Oh my gosh. And to gain access from 68 through 76, it's necessary to drop out the heater control on the right-hand side of the steering wheel. Just take the knob off, take the control out of the dash, and let it dangle, and then you can get your hand up behind there. You cannot get well, I can't get my hand up behind there because my arm's pretty good size, and I'm sick of scraping it all up. So get that heater control out of there so you can actually work on it. The earlier MGBs, you got to take the radio out. That's the easier way to do it, so you can reach through the radiator the radio opening in the dash, so you can get on the back side of that nut. Um, there's an
Hey,
engine
John.
Yes.
Yeah. One quick note about that choke cable. I think I mentioned this before on one of the calls, but I took a tube wrench and cut the whole length of it out so it would slip over the cable. And that way I could reach up there and just twist it around the cable and then pull it off again. Made it a lot easier installing that rather than trying to get a
Oh
wrench
my
up in there.
gosh. I've got a I've got a 3/4 ring spanner that's been cut off. It's just got a nub on it and it's got a slit in the ring so you can get that around the cable, reach up in there and use your thumb to get enough torque to get that thing. But however it's done, yeah, that's and the original choke cables on the T-types and MGAs can be repaired. Don't throw them away and buy a new one, please. Those you turn to the right, pull out, let it go back to the left, and it catches on some notches. Later cables, you pull them out and turn them to the right, and that's what locks them. But the MGA and earlier, you want to low when you put the cable back into the carburetors, you want to spin it so it tends to load the cable towards the left. Whereas the new type of throttle choke cables, you want to load them so they tend to turn to the right. Um, just make sure you load it. At least don't load it in the wrong direction. There's an
John,
engine. Yes.
when you're putting that choke cable nut back on, it does require a special homemade wrench. It also generally requires a blood sacrifice and quite a bit of adult language.
All that is true. All that is true. Absolutely. Yeah. Blood
And how many
sacrifice.
parts of the car is that true about?
Well, that's one. Pulling
Ev-
the
every
pulling
part of
the
the car.
pulling the dipstick out of a 74 Chrome Bumper B all the way back, getting back there and getting whether you got a hook on it or you got a string or a cable on it, and you're pulling, all of a sudden the thing pops up and your knuckles or something hit all the extra long screws that Ronnie's stereo installers, put in 30 years ago. Yeah, you can shed a lot of blood. And I go back to my line that if a person presents himself as a mechanic and he's neither bleeding, scabbed, I'm neither, scarred, I am scarred, or has clean fingernails, he's not a mechanic, he's a poser. So anyway, blood sacrifice, that's real kind. Tony Wisely, what's up? You got your hand up.
Oh, I had sent you a message about a brake master cylinder for the Lucas Armstrongs for a 72 MGB. It's a GT, and we've been having issues basically since a few months after we installed it. It's been about a year and a half to 2 years. You have to stand on the brake pedal to stop the car. Actually stand on it. Even at 35, you're standing on it to stop it.
Okay, so
And so we've been thinking that it's an easy bleed kit that we're doing. We bled the brakes, we did all that. We didn't bench bleed it. Is that a biggest issue there?
if the brake pedal is rock hard,
Hmm.
if the brake pedal is rock hard, there's no air left in the brakes.
Okay.
You got to make sure you have pedal free play. You got to make
Mhm.
sure that the pedal tunk 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 tunk,
Mhm.
which is adjusted by your brake light switch,
Yep.
68 through 80. If the master cylinder is being made with an extra large diameter, if it were, then
This is the replacement one from Moss to replace
then
the old style, but
and
it's
of
the
course you can't.
Armstrong.
Yep, I know, and you
Yeah.
can't ask them anymore.
Mhm.
So I doubt they're being made with a larger bore than is original. I mean, my
Mhm.
gut is that on brake stuff, almost all the suppliers are really cautious. Nobody wants a lawsuit. which then leaves the question, did you change your brake pads at the same time as the master cylinder?
No. The brake calipers have been replaced in front and back within the past 6 months. Both of the both front and back dual
Okay,
placements, so they're even.
the shoes usually work pretty well,
Mhm.
but there are a number of different types of brake pads, all with
We
different
we do the
coefficients.
30-30-30 rule with those as well, as you should with all brake pads. It's 30 minutes of driving, about 30 or something like it's a 30 minutes of continuous braking, and you do another, and you do this like 3 or 5 times. There's something called 30-30-30 rule. You can look it up on Google. We've done it before, and it does break in the shoes really nice, and it doesn't like overly wear them down when you're trying to start just driving
Okay.
around.
Okay, but there can only be two reasons why you have to stand on the pedal. Either the master cylinder is frozen or something crazy like that, but then the car wouldn't stop at all, or
Yeah.
the brake pads in front are the wrong ones because
Okay.
the function of the brake pads is to turn motion into heat. And the
Mhm.
old-fashioned brake pads work great, and there's a bunch of different styles out there, metallic and ceramic, and
Mhm.
oh my gosh.
I
And I
think
can't,
these are the semi-metallics.
so those are supposed to be the good ones,
Mhm.
but it has to do with the friction of the front brakes. I doubt it's the master cylinder. Doesn't
Mm,
make any sense. You haven't got any air in the system, and I mean you can adjust the rear brakes, but
yeah.
that's not the issue. If the brake pedal's nice and hard, if it's nice and hard, and this is a what year B?
This is a 72. It was
MGB.
converted from a 77 to a 72 through a hardtop conversion. We're the ones who made the Roadster into a GT. We had spoken to you once before about it too.
Okay.
We're one of the first
So
ones, you said.
the brakes that are
The
in the
brakes are
car
from originally are built from a 77 Roadster without servo assist.
without servo assist,
It
that's
was
not
originally a Roadster with a rubber bumper, no servo, as far as I remember.
all rubber
All
bumper
rubber bumper with
cars
no servo.
have
That was what it
servos.
was.
All
Yeah,
of them have servos. Call
that's
me
all it was.
tomorrow, take some pictures
Okay.
around up by the
Yeah.
master cylinder. Call me tomorrow because it's getting too specific.
Yeah.
And I will help you out. But
Hmm.
call me tomorrow, take some pictures. Okay?
Okay.
All
And we
right.
have not noticed any fluid loss either. So
No,
we're
no,
sure there's nothing
no,
there that's a problem.
no, no.
Um,
I'll
e-brake is loose. E-brake's not getting
okay.
tighter, and we've been
All
checking
right.
that too. So
Let
that's
me
only
talk
the
to you
thing.
tomorrow about it.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. And I got one other raised hand. Ian.
Hey, John, I'm in
Hey.
late again today. Just had outstanding question for you. Going back to my clutch on the 66B. It's last time I told you about it. I'd mentioned the scraping, rattling noise when
Yeah.
pressing down the clutch,
Yeah.
throughout bearing. But I'm curious from what I've learned so far is there anything else it could be from your experience that kind of that prognosis where it's just noise, and the pedal
I,
still feels fine, it has a little bit of a rough time coming out of first. There's a shutter, releasing the kind of in first, but otherwise, it seems to shift okay.
the hydraulic system either works or it doesn't.
Right.
The clutch works, kind of works, makes noises, maybe doesn't work. So I'm sure the problem lies in your bell housing.
Okay.
I know you don't want to hear that. I
Oh,
know,
I
but
know.
it's just that the hydraulics are simple. I mean, if it's throwing out if it's the lever, if it's moving 3/8 to 7/16 of an inch underneath the push rod is moving that much, then the hydraulics are just fine. And the hydraulics themselves don't induce any kind of vibration or noise or anything.
Okay.
Save the guy last week who said when he let off on his clutch, he heard a
Hmm.
noise, which is a collapsed line. He had a new line too between
Oh,
them.
that's on the cylinder,
Yeah.
the slave
So
cylinder.
or maybe there's some dirt in it. I don't know. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's the only noise that you would pick up there. So
Okay. All
Okay.
right, well, just curious about that. I've already ordered new clutch, so that's
Okay.
probably just what we're gonna end up doing.
Yep.
I'm thinking about taking this. I sent you, I emailed you. You may remember the spy cam pictures when I initially started
Yes.
looking into it, and
Yep.
so I may go back in there and see if there's anything obvious again. But at this point, it's just making the noise, and I just couldn't justify it at first. But I think we may start considering tearing into it soon, just so it's ready for MG International.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
All right, great. Thank you, John.
Right. See ya. Anyway, I'm back to some more discussion. I'm still not done with my cables here. There's an engine positioning cable on a Midget 1500 to keep the engine from moving forward in a collision. There's a handbrake cable, but we're not really talking about brakes tonight. There's the heating and ventilation cables. So these are piano wires that are in sheaths, and they usually work okay, but there's no substitute for taking them if you're redoing your heating and ventilation system. There's no substitute for taking those heater controls out of the dash, just dropping them into a jar of oil and letting them sit there, and then get something on the front of it, a hex socket, something, and just wind them up and back and wind and up and back and just get them all nice and lubed up. That's the ones that are sitting in the dash. You can sop enough oil off them so they won't drip onto you later on. The cables themselves, if you pull the piano wire out of the sheath, sometimes you can't get it back in. You got to fiddle around with it. You got to have a good vise, so you can straighten out that piano wire, and then put oil down the cable and grease on the piano wire that goes down on the inside, and get that all into place, and then put a pair of vice grips on the end of it and work it about 1,000 times back and forth, so you know that it's moving as easily as possible. After that, it's what's moving, and on an MGA or B, on the heater on the side of the engine, you got the heater control valve, which I understand are better now than they have been, in that they don't start leaking 2 weeks after you purchase them. And then the flapper, which is down inside on an MGB and an MGC, that diverts the airflow between the floor and the windscreen. That sometimes you got to crawl in there with a screwdriver and disconnect the cable from it, and lube it, make it work nice and freely. If you do, then your heater controls will work nicely. They didn't work nicely just at the get-go until 1977. The 77's got a real nice heater, big knobs you can grab a hold of. 68 and 69, they're all flat. They're horrid. And then later they're more pointy. You can at least get your fingers on them, turn them. The earlier ones up through 67 were like that. So that was handy. And then starting in 72 or 73, they're all illuminated. The dials are illuminated. Door openers. What about a cable for a door opener for an MGA? Looks just like a throttle cable, only it sits down inside the door, and you pull the outer part of it, and the door pops open. And I wanted to include rods tonight too, in that the MGA has rods, not cables. I think you'd be better served with cables, but very few people really have that kind of trouble with the rods that run. The front one, oh my gosh, that's got to be almost 4 foot long between where you grab it on the inside of the car and where it operates a pivot down in the nose, all having to do with getting the bonnet latch open. There are rods also to get the boot lid open. So those are just, you want to make sure they're not bent up. You want to make sure they're lubricated. There's a lot of stuff here. So I've included rods and hoses and lines and cables, tubes, pipes. Look at them. They should all be tight. The fuel lines, the evaporative lines can get cracks in them, cause the car to run funny, give you gasoline smells. The steel lines, we talked about using anti-seize when you go to put those onto an oil cooler. So anyway, that's my quick treatise on all those. But there's a lot of cables and lines in there, and some of them have to have free play. The choke and the throttle have to have free play. You want to make sure that the your battery cable, if you ever change a battery cable, what an enormously unnecessary task is that almost always. But if you do, make sure you leave plenty of cable there so that you can trim that a couple of times over the next couple of years and still be able to get it fitted onto the top of the battery on a battery clamp. All right, so I've chatted a whole lot about that. Way too long. So I want to open it up and have anyone who'd like to ask a question about
I
rods and
got it.
cables besides Judd. Wait, Judd's up first. Judd's up first because
Well,
he's
I
got
just
his hand
wanted
up.
to mention the two kind of important ones you left out on the TD and the MGA. So far, you're not going to go anywhere because you haven't started them. And
Starter cable, thank you. Okay.
yeah, now mine have gotten kind of hard to pull, but I don't think it's the cable. I think it's the switch that it pulls against, and I think I just need to go in there and clean those up. But I've never taken apart and looked at them.
So if you recently installed a new starter cable,
Nope,
okay. So
I know they're original.
that starter cable will pull out of the sheath. If you undo the end of it, the danger here is the end is splayed. And even though you put some solder on it and everything, you can't push it back through the housing. So in the case of the starter cable, it's so easy. You can heat the end of the brass cable up, I mean the handle, and pull the flexible cable out of it, put in a new bicycle brake cable,
Oh
and,
wow.
and
Okay.
run that all the way down, and measure twice, cut once. Because once you've nipped it, and usually you want to tin it before you nip it so that it doesn't splay, because you got to get it into that little coupler on the back side of the starter switch.
Yeah, I have had it out of that coupler and put it back in, and I'm reasonably confident that it's back in correctly and deep enough. But yeah, that can be a bear.
So anyway, while you're doing that, then when you'd put a new cable in, you would run grease along it as you're feeding it down in there, and then back and forth with some grease, so it's as nice as as smooth as it can possibly be.
This isn't the right one to talk about it, but those the switch that it pulls. I mean, it's just a mechanical pulling
Yeah,
something together. Have you ever had to take one of those apart, or
it's
are they come apart? They
with
sealed.
extreme difficulty. The edges have been
That's what I was
swedged around, and to open it up is I one of my guys, Greg Purvis, opened one up years ago, because all you had to do is open it up and clean the copper contacts and put it all back together, and it works just great again. But it just never looked right, because it was done on some sort of machine that's a reverse of a can opener. So it just it is
They
getting
talked me
it
right out of doing it.
getting it apart is just a horror. But it might be that if you I can't believe that's the part of it that's stiff. That I would think that over a period of time that would get weaker rather than stiffer to pull. Um, but
Okay.
you can
Well,
always replace.
the parts start wonderfully, and
Yeah,
once the contact is made, it's room,
yeah,
bang.
yeah. But you can replace that inner cable with a bicycle brake cable.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, Bill Thornton's got his hand raised. Bill.
Hey, hey, John. I just wanted to touch back on what you were saying about anti-seize lubricants. I mean, I'm
Yes.
brought up in England on copper grease, and that's what I've always used for hot area anti-seize. But I get sideways looks when I go in an AutoZone or somewhere and ask for copper grease. They've never heard of it. So
Never heard of it.
what
But
anti-seize do you recommend or
there,
use?
there are three types. It used to be lead in an oil solution, And then there's copper in an oil solution, must be your copper grease. And then there's nickel, and they all have to do with different temperatures. So that just the cheap, just the crummy old silver anti-seize. It used to be, I don't know what it is now. It used to be lead, but it's that works fine. But there is copper anti-seize and there is nickel anti-seize, all having to do with temperatures. More than that, I don't know.
Oh, okay, fine. I just wondered why people look at me strangely when I ask for copper grease. No, why?
Because I've never heard of it.
Okay, well, there you go. All right, thanks.
You're welcome. Any more questions about cables or rods or let's see. Hose, a flexible tube conveying water used chiefly for watering plants and in firefighting. So we're in good company there. A cable, a wire rope or metal chain of great tensile strength. A tube is a hollow, elongated cylinder, especially one to convey fluids. A pipe is a long tube or hollow body for conducting a liquid, gas, or finely divided solid, or for structural purposes. A line is piping for conveying a fluid, such as steam. Steam is not a fluid. Rod, a slender bar, as of wood or metal. Yeah. I looked up all the definitions tonight before I started up. Bob Whitfield, what's up?
Hey John, how are you doing?
Great.
On my 50 TD, I have the separate temperature gauge, engine temperature, and not that dual gauge.
Yes, sir.
Um, you had said that that tube was capillary.
Yes, sir.
Mine appears to be just a solid wire coming from the expansion tank, does a couple of loop-to-loops, and then straight back to the temperature gauge in the dash panel.
It appears to be a solid wire. Yes, sir, it does, but it's not.
Really?
Really?
So the ether tube is actually at the expansion tank and not in the gauge.
Well, there's one in the radiator. That's the bulb. And so when you heat that up, then it puts pressure on the whole system. And what you have on your dashboard is a pressure gauge that's calibrated in degrees.
Okay. Do you happen to know? Mine doesn't function. Do you happen to know if
There-
the ether capsule can be? How do you fix?
You unwind it all out of the car, and that's the thread on that is 5/8. Oh my God, 5/8 18, I think, where it goes into the radiator. So I don't know if you can get a bolt to put in there for the time being, but um, anyway, you wrap it all up and send it to one of 2 or 3 places in the United States: the West Valley Instruments in California, MoMA in Albuquerque, British Gauges, or somebody that took over for Nicenger Instruments just outside of New York City. But if you look up, just Google Smith's temp gauge repair, a couple names will come up. But I've given you the ones that I know of that are good.
Yeah, there's a group called D&D I just spoke with, which really seem to know gauge as well.
Okay, all right.
So this cannot be a do-it-yourself
No, sir.
type repair.
No.
And getting that capillary tube, which I thought was a wire, wound through the firewall, little tiny hole, looks like a bear.
Yeah, well, it's easier to get the bulb in through than the gauge through. So yeah, you got it. It went through there once. It'll go through there. You might have to cut the grommet out of the way and then buy a new grommet, and slit the grommet and then put it all back together and put the grommet in afterwards.
Okay, that answered the question. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. All right, Tom Gunderson. We're back to Tom. Tom tried it a couple of times ago, but now we're waiting for Tom to come on. Waiting here a little bit. Otherwise, I'm going to slip over to Steve Shupak and we'll talk to Tom later. Steve, what's up?
Hey John, so I got a neighbor with this 59A and
Yeah,
we got it to run just barely. We got it lit off on varnish. I said, okay, we got to get this crap out. So we tried to drain the tank and there was so much crap in it that I said, that just doesn't look good. I think it's time for a new tank. How much of a pain in the ass is that going to be to
isn't
drop out the tank?
yeah, there are two long bolts that hold straps.
Yeah,
And of course, those will be rusty. So
yeah,
you take a look at those, and you want to get the original fuel sending unit out of the gas tank, and replace it into the new tank. Do not buy a new one; they're
okay.
horrid. Ask me how I really feel. And you
Don't hold back, John.
and you want to use a cork gasket on that to hold that up to the tank. I just my landlord Tony, he's got an MGA, and he just sent his fuel gauge and sending unit to somebody. I don't know who he sent them to, and it's supposed to come back in that they're calibrated.
Hmm.
And because his had been in the tank forever, it was just frozen. It wouldn't move up or
Yeah.
down.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah,
it's anyway, those original ones have a much better wire wound resistor in them
yeah.
than the new ones do.
Okay.
And then I think that's it. Run a ground from the there's a
So,
tab which hangs down. If you're looking at the right rear wheel,
yeah.
there's a tab that hangs down about 11 o'clock, maybe 10 o'clock, to hold some cables or wiring. Take a ring terminal around that little the 1032 screw there, and run it down to your sending unit.
Yeah.
One of the four screws that hold the top of the sending unit, and not the six screws that hold it into the tank. When you're putting it in the tank, use that gasket, the quart gasket, and use number two, Permatex number two goo
Okay.
on it, and on the screws too. So, yeah,
I've also got some Hylamar sitting around, if that's any better.
no, you use that number two stuff.
Number two, Permatex. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It used to be called aviation compound. God,
Oh yeah,
you
I
get
got
it
some
on
of
your
that.
fingers. It takes days to get it off your fingers.
Makes you
Sticky,
look like a mechanic, huh?
sticky stuff. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Hey,
Not looking
thank
forward
you.
to this one.
Hey, great. Greg Fisher, what's up?
Yes, you had somebody had mentioned earlier on the HS4 venting off the excuse me, the
Float bowls.
floats,
Yep.
float bowls. And I actually have had it running this way for a year and a half. It runs underneath the float bowls before it goes off to the canisters.
Oh yeah, it works
What's
just
going to
fine.
happen?
One day the carburetor is going to overflow, and the fluid is going to get caught in the bottom of that, and now atmospheric pressure cannot push strongly enough on that to push down on the gasoline in the float bowls, so it'll cause your car to run lean. Okay, so you're muted, Greg, there, but it's
I guess I should just adjust it then.
yeah, just pull it up. You can use some zip ties and just get it up someplace so that if there I had a weird one. A guy from the Chicagoland Club, before it was the Chicagoland Club, back in the days of the AMGBA, Pat Amarina had a Inca Yellow 79. I swear it was around that year. And if you take a right hand turn, the car would kill. Start right back up again with a key. Left hand turn, no problem. Right hand turn. And it's just like, what in the world might be going on? And there's a tube that on a 77 through 80 that comes off the bottom of the anti-run-on valve, goes underneath the coil and comes back up and out. So you got a low spot. The engineers put a low spot in a tube. And it's a great big tube. It's as big around as your thumb. But something happened, and there was fluid in there. So when he went around a corner, it would block off the free flow of air, it put a vacuum on the gasoline and the float bowls, same as the anti run-on valve does, and it just car stopped just like that. but then it would restart. And I pursed my lips over the end of that and gave a great, huge huff puff down there. And I bunched it. I don't look like oily. I didn't know what the stuff was. Water. I don't know what it was. Came out of it and ran good ever since. But you've got to keep that. You've got to keep a low spot from occurring. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mike Baldwin, what's up?
Good morning, John, or good evening, rather. A couple of things. Your mileage may vary. Comments on the clamps. The Jubilee clamps are what us gearheads that work on GM cars also derogatorily called worm clamps. There's a clamp that is used on a lot of U.S. cars. They call them tower clamps. There's a screw and a wire goes down and goes up to a flared, tapered area. And the benefit, I've seen a lot of the guys back in the car days take those and throw them away and put worm clamps on because they're tighter. And the worm clamp can be clamped tighter. But one of the benefits of the tower clamp, and you will still see them on a lot of cars from back in that day, is the tower clamp will adjust its pressure. In other words, it keeps a constant pressure as your rubber hose expands and contracts. A worm clamp, if the hose contracts, it'll have to tighten it further. So Jubilees are just another version of a worm clamp that we see in the U.S. But if you're looking for coolant, I've dropped this in the chat. If you're especially for coolant hoses, the tower clamps will hold and keep more consistent pressure as a hose ages and moves around, and your system expands and contracts.
Okay.
Second thing on the brakes, the young man a while ago was talking about his 72. You're obviously the brake expert. You're going to talk to him tomorrow. But I ran into a similar problem on my 72 when I did a brake job in reverse. And what I mean by that is the position valve that lets you know if you lost brake pressure one way or the other, that PDWA, whatever it is. I made a mistake during the bleeding, and I accidentally let it shuttle one way, and I ended up with no brakes to the rear. And so I finally got it rearranged, got it back in the center. But if that thing shuts to the other direction, you don't have any brakes to the front. Your pedal feels great, but you just lost your front brakes. And I'm just wondering if he's checked to make sure in the bleeding that didn't happen, because it is easy to do.
I'll talk to him about that tomorrow. That's not my experience with those shuttle valves, but
I didn't say it was easy to do, but I did have it happen. And part of it was the fact that I just probably was too aggressive with the pedal trying to bleed it. Once I got it back in position and gravity bled things and put a little air out at each end, it was fine. The trick was getting it back in the right position. And the trick that I didn't find, but I was told to do, is since it had shuttled to where I only had brakes to the rear, what I ended up doing, I believe that's correct, as I ended up taking the switch out, putting a probe down there where I could feel where the little V is in it, and got my wife in there to work the brake pedal, and I cracked the hose open on the caliper, and I said, hit the brake as hard as you can. And it does that. That just simulates the loss in the other direction. And the shuttle valve tried to go back, and I caught it. And then once I held it in position and did not hit the brake pedal hard again, gravity bled every corner, it's fine. But that shuttle valve, I've got it out of position on some GM pickup I got too. It's somewhat easy to do if you do your bleeding using a brake pedal.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Let's see, Tom Gunderson. Tom's still there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right. You know the little hard tube that goes on to the vacuum of the distributor. I've got a 57.
Yep.
It's interesting. There's a little small rubber vacuum. Instead of the hard tube going directly into the vacuum disc, it's a piece. Somebody put a rubber piece in between there, and the reason they did was because the little hard tube, as it is supposed to screw into that vacuum disc, it won't fit correctly because of that oil hard line.
Okay. All right.
And I was just curious that there's nothing wrong with the way the car runs as far as a vacuum would cause a problem. but I had I couldn't get that hard tube to fit because because of the oil tube was right
Okay.
on top of it.
Okay.
I did that. Is that any
That's
kind of an issue?
no, no.
Okay,
As long as long as the car still feels like it's driving the
right.
way it used
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
that's okay. There's a they must have stopped the threaded vacuum advance units around 1968, somewhere around there, and because it's just too expensive, and
Yeah.
they just went to a nipple. And sometimes you'll see, you got that steel line or the copper line that comes around the back of the head, and that's just run into a hose, and that's run into the nipple. As long as you get the vacuum there, that's what's important.
Okay. All right. Now, just quick question. You kind of answered the question talking about the fuel valve getting power, and you were saying that the grounding was connected. My car is still a positive ground,
Okay.
and I sent my gauge and pump to West, and they rebuilt it.
Okay.
I put it back in. It's in correctly, but when I look at the gauge, it usually when I first start the car up, uh, it shows empty. But then if you tap on the gauge, it jumps up to full, and sometimes just flickers back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I was thinking that it could have been that grounding. This is a year ago or something, and I may have I tried to jump a little ground strap back at the tank, but it made no difference. What
Well,
could I do
it's
to troubleshoot that?
well, it might be the gauge that's faulty. If the gauge is powered, um, and the sending unit is not hooked up, it'll read full. Sort of doesn't make any sense. But if the sending unit is hooked up and the out and the connection for the sending unit should be at 6 o'clock. MGBs are more towards the top, but MGAs are at 6 o'clock. As long as that's done, and if you ground the tank, um, by going just use a black wire with some spade terminals or ring terminals on the back end of it, go from the four screw pattern on the outside of the sending unit to something close by that you can get a ground for. Make sure that's well grounded. Then any other problem must be the gauge itself.
Okay.
So that'd
Well,
be.
I know you're saying ground, positive ground.
But yeah, it doesn't make ground is ground. It just
Yeah. Okay, I got you.
it's
I
not
got you.
it's not the fuel gauge doesn't know whether it's positive or negative. It's just an electromagnet.
Oh, that's true. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, David Halliday. David Halliday from someplace where the temperature must be in transition. But we'll wait. I see David Halliday, but I don't hear him yet because he's not unmuted. There we go.
Yeah, I thought I'd unmuted, but it must have
Yep.
something happened
Yep.
anyway. Just a quick question. I brought a UK MGB GT back to Australia a couple of years ago, and to get it registered here, I've got to fit an evaporative loss system, which is a bit frustrating. And I don't really want to go to the extent that they did for the North American MGBs, but just thought I'd run this past you. I've got hold of a charcoal canister. I was going to put a little adapter in the rubber fuel filler pipe and then run a hose to the charcoal canister and also a hose from the rocker cover and the tappet chest cover to the charcoal canister, and obviously run that to the air cleaner. Just use rubber pipe for all of that.
Sure.
And then once it's registered, I'll take it all off again, but I've got to do it to get it registered.
Well, sometimes those guys have got a picture they got some book, and if it, even though it works or is hooked up so it would work, they don't care. It's not original. So make sure before you do all that, make sure that you'll pass if you can get in doing something like that, you know.
Yeah, they never sold the cars here with the evaporative loss system, so it's yeah, the only ones that've got the evaporative loss systems really are the ones that have come from North America that have
Sure.
been imported out here. But yeah, so they just want to know that the fumes are all contained and fed back into the engine again.
Yeah,
So
just
it's
yep. You need a
Yeah,
you
what
need
year's the
enough.
car?
it's 79.
What? Oh,
And from 76 onwards, you've got these Australian
yeah.
design regulations which cover emissions. Unfortunately, the car was perfectly legal to drive in the UK and France and all those sorts. And I drove it across Canada for 10,000 miles as well without any issues, but I can't drive it in Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go figure. Yep.
So the hose to run from the front to the back, I was thinking of using perhaps a bit of fuel pipe and just like, would I use fuel hose, John, or just
Well, you could, I mean, you can just zip tie fuel hose all the way along.
I could, yeah.
It's only temporary. The original line was aluminum, I think.
Right, yeah.
Someone told me that. It makes more sense if it was steel. If you're going to use a
Yeah.
No, it's
steel
just
line
it
and
was
leave,
steel.
okay, if you're going to do a steel line, then just go to whatever auto parts store you've got and buy 12 feet of 5/16 or 3/8 tubing and just get underneath the car someday and just keep bending and zip tying until it goes
I've got an
all
old,
the
What
way.
I've got an old
what may be
MGB.
easier, what may be
Yeah.
easier, if you remember on Land Rovers, their fuel line was actually like a urethane or a plastic tubing.
Right.
So
Yes.
it might be easier to run and then just use some rubber tubing to connect it at each end.
On each end. Yeah. I've got a piece of old MGB fuel line, which I thought I could even adapt that possibly. But and then I'd need a non-vented fuel cap and a non-vented rocker cover cap, I guess, as well. But which they would have had for the American market. You can't buy those in the UK. But I've
So if you got pictures of what you need or an idea of what you need, you can call Sports Car Craftsman in Denver, Colorado. They have absolutely everything that you need, and they know exactly what you're talking about. And Paul goes to New Zealand once every other year, so he speaks your same language almost.
right.
Anyway, they might be able to help you out a whole lot with just a package deal,
Yes.
just all the right stuff to make it work.
It's very frustrating, but yeah, that's the other thing I've got to do is put child seat anchorages in the back if I want to have it registered as a 2+2 or a 4-seater. So I've already brought it in as a 4-seater. So yeah, you've got to have the nuts so that you can put the rear child seats in the back. Because yeah, again, I'll never put child seats in it, but they've got to be able to tick their boxes, which is very frustrating.
Yeah, you got two magnets there that look like those will carry children, so yeah.
That's right. Yeah, well, that picture was in England. Both those cars are actually in Australia now. We brought them out with us. Yeah. So cool. Okay, no, thank you, John.
I just watched The Iron Lady. Is that Meryl Streep?
Oh yes, about Margaret Thatcher.
Margaret Thatcher, and of course the two absolute go-to scenes are when she's won her first by-election and she's driving to London in her ZB Magnet, and then the next one is she's a minister for I don't know education, maybe higher, and she's casting her briefcase into the back of her Harvest Gold 1973 MGB GT. Those are the two good parts of that. So yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie yet. I'll have to look out for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see who else. Who else we got on here? Who else got their hand up here? I can't tell exactly. Is it Tom Gunderson? Are you still? Yeah, you still got a hand up, Tom. Don't know if you mean to or not. But I'm going to go over to the chat section because there are a bunch of chats, and I've got to.
John, if you don't mind, I
George,
can't figure out how to get
that's okay. That's okay.
for some reason. So, real quick question, a couple of questions and a comment. I got to tell you. Number one, you said use that banjo hose from the thermostat over the radiator, but your 77 and on, they come out with just a elbow hose.
Yes, they do.
And so I guess we're stuck with that.
So
the
that's
thing I got. Excuse me. Go ahead.
You're right. You're right. The earlier ones are concerned about the vibration.
Yeah. One quick question, and then a comment. I'm rebuilding this 77 and putting it all back together from the paint. There's two little buttons that set up on the back part, just behind the cockpit. One on the left, one on the right.
This is 1972?
77.
77. Those are seatbelt fixing points.
Is that what they are?
I bet, because the caps pop off and you got a 7/16 20 thread underneath there.
Yeah, it's right on the paint job, right?
Yeah, they're little, about the size of a dime.
Yeah, about that. Maybe.
Yeah, those are seatbelt fixing points.
Yeah, they're not used on my 77.
No.
Okay. All right. One quick comment that's just general information. I bought two wiring harnesses for the headlights. I'm putting new headlight harnesses in them. And when I go to my brights, they're dim, and when I go to my dims, they're bright. The wires were switched in where they plug onto the headlights. So I had to rig them up to make them work. So
hey, but you knew how to do it.
Well, yeah, I know how to do it. It's just brand new from wherever. Okay, so just caution on that in case somebody runs into that problem.
Thanks,
John. Take care.
Okay. All right, I'm going over to chat now because it's a 8:45. I'm not going to I don't know if I'm going to get through these all.
Well, John, the first one there is mine is too long for you to read. So when you get to it, it starts 175 miles. Let me know and I'll tell it to you in 10 words.
175 miles. Yep. So you're almost all done. 3 miles from Tom's Hangar stoplight, very busy 6-lane street in Columbia, SC. The TD decided to save gas by shutting down the number 2 cylinder. Of course, I'm at an uphill stop, but with copious coaxing, I was able to get the TD moving and limp the rest of the way onto the hangar. So the question is, why is number 2 not firing? Shut down the car to let it cool. And Tom joined me after what takes drink. We're drinking beer here. We got the bonnet open, looking, scratching the heads.
Almost to the really important part. So Tom picks up this blue wire that's not attached to anything.
It says this is important.
Yeah. Do you think this matters? And of course, what had happened was it's of course the ignition wire. It had come out of the distributor cap, and the car does great. But can you think of what would? I mean, it was 175 miles of pretty hard running in hot weather.
Hey, it wasn't tight enough to start with. That's all.
All I can guess. Okay, same with me. All right.
Nice story. Nice story. Sorry, I couldn't read the whole thing faster. So. Neil says, my 64B brake master cylinder lost fluid while stored over the winter. Where would the leak most likely be? It's either on the ground. You look at the inside of each of the 4 wheels, and there's either a vertical line there where the fluid ran out of the cylinder. Calipers never leak. It's always a rear wheel cylinder. Or there's brake fluid in the carpeting underneath the master cylinder, meaning that it's leaking out of the master cylinder, and it's a real slow leak, and you really can only tell that by taking the pedal box cover off and popping the rubber boot off on the front of the master cylinder and seeing if there's fluid in there inside the boot. There should not be. And so that means that's leaking. So it's most probably a rear wheel cylinder. That was our most popular repair at University Motors. Rear wheel cylinders went bad all the time, but it could be someplace else. So look for leaks on the ground first. So let's see, we're going through here. Mike Baldwin isn't happy that Moss is, but remember, Moss is purchased by a private equity firm, and what's the first job of a private equity firm is to squeeze the equity out of the company to pay back your bank loan. I mean, it's just the way it is. So
That's I didn't put that in there, John. I didn't want to be too pedantic, but basically they want to suck the guts out of the bug and leave it to die. So it's not a pretty story.
Hey, it's other people have used that before, and it's the rest of us out here, the Moss dealers and distributors and so forth, that we're taking doing the work now. But anyway, it's just a slight realignment. There's always something going on.
You don't have to say you agree with it. You don't have to say you agree with me.
Barry Jacobs writes and says, I purchased a 73 MGB on Friday. Look forward to seeing you in Sandusky. Okay. And Mike Baldwin writes in and said, our local grocery store chain has recipes on their website. Well, there. Okay. I think Moss does too. All right. John Stark, looking forward to seeing you again at Quality Coaches. Always something new to learn. There's always stuff to learn. Oh my gosh. Darren Chapman says, I'm removing the emission system from my B, a 1980 MGB. I'm very interested in what tubes, hoses, and what to do. So please, this is it for Darren. For Darren, call me tomorrow. I'll be available to answer the phone tomorrow, and I'll be able to talk to you a little bit more about what to take off, and more importantly, what not to take off. There's an air pump. Oh my gosh, that's got to go. That's just awful to have on there. But the twin charcoal canisters and the anti-run-on valve, all that stuff, if it's working correctly, makes the car run it doesn't impact the way the car runs, and it does make it shut off. So that, again, to Darren, who's been working with Alan Vinegar up in Toronto. So Joel Ginsparg, over the years, the previous owners of my MGBs have replaced all the hoses with a variety of hoses of various sizes. I can't find any reference material that lists the standard inside dimensions of the hoses as the car was shipped by the factory. That's interesting. That's something for Fred, or someone who wants to be like Fred. Fred's learned everything there is to know, I think, about SU carburetors. So now we need the hose man who can help Joel here with a definition. There's a lot of information out there, though. If you just keep scouring, Barney Gaylord's got a wonderful site, MGAs. So it won't help, maybe in the MGB, but there's a lot of information out there, especially on mgcars.org.uk. Phil Berridge, I have a 74B with a typical head gasket leak between 2 and 3. I plan to replace the gasket and have the head machined this year. I live 45 minutes northeast of Grand Rapids. Can you suggest a machine shop, please? Yes, I was just there today. The machine shop that you can use if you're close by, or if you want to put something in a box and send it, is CD, Charlie Delta, CD Engine Service, Hudsonville, Michigan. Yes. And the problem with the leaking between 2 and 3 on the cylinder head has to do with whether the holes through which the head studs pass are relieved, are chamfered on the underside of the head. So again, I got a lineup of people calling me, but Phil Berridge, call me tomorrow. I'll talk to you some more about what's going on, about how to chamfer the underside of the cylinder head. It's just critical in putting it back on to keep it from leaking. And windshield washer bag is shot on a 74B. I thought I got one. Don't limit your look, Phil, just in the United States. Go overseas too. There's Lamora out of Germany, and they take their orders in this country from Engel, Engel, Engel Imports in Kalamazoo. There's the MG Owners Club. Of course, there's Moss Europe. There is Rimmer Brothers. There's Brown and Gammons, and somebody out there has it. And you can also call Paul Deershaw at Sports Car Craftsman and say, "Hey, you got an original bag?" He might have one. Don't know. All right, here we've got another one. If you have engine run on, do what we do, shutting down an airplane engine. Pull the mixture cutoff, which starves the engine of fuel, and then it stops. But we don't have a cutoff. How do you do this in your car? Is to lean the air fuel mixture by immediately upon switching the ignition off, floor the accelerator pedal. This creates a very lean mixture, and the car will kill. So that's an interesting way. I have never tried that before. Is to hit the throttle all the way and cause the air pistons to lift up a little bit and lean out. Very interesting. I usually just clutch it, but thank you for that idea.
Hey, John,
Yes,
we've talked a lot about the charcoal canister and the anti-run-on valve tonight. Remember last year we disabled mine. Can you tell us exactly what one should expect if we disable the anti-run-on valve?
sure. The anti-run-on valve fitted from 73 through 80 on all the models. Starves the engine for gasoline at shutoff, and the car stops dead. Sometimes it stops dead anyway, but sometimes bump, 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 it runs on. So if you have that system in place, it's always, as long as everything else is in place, it's good to make it work. It will not work with a downdraft Weber, and that's why yours is disabled. Okay, Tony Wasley, question about the replacement brake master cylinders. Oh yeah, we used to buy SSB 775s and rebuild the brake master cylinders. We just rebuild them all the time. Or the new cylinders, SSB 1217s. Those were the rebuild kits. They aren't available anymore, not made from the same people. So I've talked to a couple of people recently who've gone through 2 or 3 master cylinders because they just don't work correctly. I can't tell you what's wrong. They just don't work correctly. So I just don't know. I don't know what the answer is right now. Bill Thornton says Jubilee comes from the Jubilee Clips Limited, formed in the 1920s. So anyway, the name became generic, just like Hoover vacuum cleaners. Yeah, yeah, in England, yeah, you can have any kind of vacuum cleaner, but you'll call it a Hoover no matter who makes it. Yeah. That used to be the case here with cameras, that people called them Kodaks instead of cameras. Here we got the tower clamps. Thank you very much, Mike Baldwin, for giving us that bit of information. And 8:05, has John finished his comments on his original topic? No, not at 8:05. I was not. For MGB choke replacement tips, see University Motors video number 320, choke cable tips. So anyway, including a description of making that special wrench. David Hay, thank you very much for finding my video number 320. Let's see. Let's go here a little further here. This is referring to YouTube video. Right, we got that. Got that. And what time's a good time to call me? The best time is between 1 and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I answer the phone far more frequently during that window than I do before or after. And Yeah, anyway, if you're calling at 10 o'clock because you're underneath your car and you're jammed up and you need an answer, I very often will answer the phone, but I prefer to take the calls between 1 and 2. So, um, okay, we're going down here. Okay, here we go. Mark Webb's heard of copper grease. Here, but we've got Dwayne Schmidt who's put in a deal here for copper anti-seize from Permatex. So, and it's a whole explanation of that. Sandy Brainsky says if memory serves me correctly, on the T-types, the threads on the expansion tank on the radiator is the same as the drain plug in the gas tank. That very well could be because it's British standard pipe. I said it was 7/16 18, and that's what size tap I use for all the later MGB cylinder heads to clean that up. I don't think I don't think 7/16 9/16 is BSF. So it would be a coarser thread than that. But anyway, I'm just talking out loud here. At some point, it goes 5/8 18. Maybe that's on the TF or something. But it's yes. British Standard pipe, which is part of the Whitworth form of threads. British Standard pipe is used on all of our MGs all the way through for fuel, for oil, and for water. British Standard pipe. It's his own pipe thread system.
Hey, John.
Yes.
I've found that that British Standard pipe thread also applies to anything that plugs into the head or the manifolds. On my C,
Well,
they're British Standard.
Okay. All
So
right.
there are a bunch of little connections on the inlet manifold for vacuums
Okay.
and various connections, and the two ports, the air ports that go into the head, those are also British Standard.
Okay. Thank you. The later ones for the MGB or the MGB ones are American thread. Thank goodness. 7/16 20. The air injectors, but I know the MGC ones are larger. I know
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Yeah.
they're
Those are a lot harder to plug off. Have it look nice at the end.
I've seen a lot of confusion on the internet, people confused by what that thread is because they think it's SAE
Or
and it
or
doesn't.
metric or metric or yeah. Yep.
But I actually found plugs for that in the British Standard
Okay.
on Amazon of
Okay.
all places. So you can find them fairly readily if
Thank
you
you.
need.
I have a job to do on an MGC myself, so I'm going to need to do that. So thank you. Yep. Let's see. Jim Newsoff says my 74B has had a 25% error since I bought it in 99. That must mean the speedo, right, Jim? You're asking about the speedo on your car? Is Jim still on?
A bunch of people answered him on the
Yeah,
stuff
keep
right
reading
now.
ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't even got down there. Yeah, it's a speedometer and odometer error, so that means that it's got the wrong speedometer in it. And they changed in 1974 from 1,280 turns per mile on the chrome bumpered cars to 1,000 turns per mile on the rubber bumpered cars. So if you get one or the other in place, it's going to read a quarter high or a quarter low. So that's just getting the right speedo. So and I got a video about it. So imagine that. So let's
That
see.
video is one of the ones I recommend more than anything else. The one we did on instrument panels and gauges, because we came up with all those niche little companies that repair those things.
Thank you.
So
Yes, I
that's a
saw
good
that
video.
list. Thanks, Marty, for putting that list up in there. Yep. Yep. Let's see. John Lind says with an original SU fuel pump, I can increase the pump pressure by screwing the diaphragm shaft down more turns or partial turns. No, I don't think so. I don't think you can change the pressure. Maybe nominally. I mean, like a tiny little bit. But um, John, when you're assembling the fuel pump and you're screwing the diaphragm up into the solenoid and checking at each sixth of a turn, you get to the point where the points will flick over or they won't flick over by the change of one position. So get it so it flicks over and then unscrew it another full one turn. The workshop manual says 2/3 of a turn. It's not enough. One full turn, and then push the solenoid, the diaphragm up into the solenoid so the points flick over, and then use something up in there, matchsticks. I don't something or other. I've got a little metal scribe to hold that diaphragm up. So when you do screw it down, then it still has the flexibility to move.
Oh,
Because if you screw it into the base like this, it won't pull up hard enough. It won't.
that's the problem.
That's the problem.
That's the problem. Thank you.
Hey, it was worth watching tonight. Even if I got your answer at 9:01. So
Well, now I'll be done by 11 o'clock, you know?
hey, all right. Okay. Yep. And another cheap trick is to just hook it up so it's going to and just tighten the screws round as you go. That works too. But there's that little shaft that holds the little hardened shaft that holds the points in place. That'll start to dance out, and all of a sudden it's not working. You got to take it all back apart again.
Okay. Just hold it up, put the thing in there, and then screw it together.
Yep, that's very carefully detailed in your workshop manual.
Very good.
How to do that.
Thank you.
All right, okay. Larry
John.
says, what's the length of a drive shaft for 79B with overdrive, or can I use the standard one I have? Larry, you are in luck tonight. You can use the same drive shaft. It changes, the overall length changes something like 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch. It's of no consequence. So you can use that same drive shaft.
Great. Great. Do I need to change the length of the speedometer cable?
Yes. Buy what year car do you have? 79B. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just buy an overdrive cable.
Just straight from Moss and overdrive cable.
Yep. And you'll thread that onto the side of the overdrive, and then there's supposed to be a J clip and a bolt that holds it to the cross member underneath there.
Yes.
But you use the poor man's approach and use a couple of wire ties, and just a nice wide radius, a nice big radius. The tighter the radius, the more it's going to screw up the inside of the cable. A nice big wide radius and bring that right through the firewall right behind the in. It's just easy to do.
Perfect. Because it's a 80, but I'm putting a 79 engine transmission and overdrive in it.
Yeah. It fits right in. Of all the things you've got to argue with is the left-hand motor mount. That's it.
Yeah. I'm
Everything,
coming to find out.
everything else is easy. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, John.
Sure. And then when you are fitting that, there's a fourth gear rather lockout switch on the front end of the remote control housing. The one up at, if you're looking at the ass end of it, the one at 11 o'clock on the intermediate housing, that's the reverse light switch. And you can get to that from underneath the car, no problem. But the one that sits right up on top at the front of the remote control is the least accessible electrical component in the vehicle. So put a new switch in there and test it 20 times just with a test light and a battery to make sure that, yes, every time you go into fourth, it does go continuous. Because changing it later.
Lockout.
Yeah, fourth gear lockout. Yep.
Fourth gear lockout. Okay, I knew that was going to be a problem.
New switch, absolutely. It's just a real bugger when it fails.
Great. I thank you very much, John.
You're very welcome. Oh, here we go. What's that?
This is Barney. I have a
Oh, Barney.
question on
Yeah.
overdrive. I'm currently helping somebody swap out a clutch and an MGB. It has a late model overdrive gearbox and an early model car with a small tunnel. Things are kind of tight. Which models, which of overdrive transmission are supposed to have that right angle gearbox on the speedometer cable?
None. That was just for the direct drives. If you want to put one on there, you sure can to just to make access easier.
That's the problem.
So I think I think Barney that's the um I've just muted everybody because that's some background noise. So Barney, you're gonna have to unmute yourself when you come back on. But the original overdrives didn't use a 90-degree drive on them. Um, just the standard ones did. And Barney, I can't see you and I can't hear you. I don't know if you're still talking. You can sure come
Yeah,
on back.
I'm still here.
All right. Okay.
You're saying that none of the overdrives had that little gearbox on the cable?
Correct. That's just the direct drives. Yep.
Well, now I feel bad because I just talked somebody into buying that little gearbox.
That's so expensive. But it's but this is a hybrid, so you're probably right, Barney. You're probably right in that you don't have to make this giant loop now with the cable, and it'll
It's a late model gearbox with
yeah,
overdrive,
yeah,
and it's in a 67B that's got the smaller tunnel. And when
right.
they took that thing out, it was a bitch to pull engine and transmission
Oh
out
yeah,
together and get
yes,
that tail flange over the cross member. And then they buggered up the speedometer cable in the process of doing that.
sure, sure. Yeah. Well, you don't have to have that there, but it would make it a whole lot easier, probably, to get some stuff back in. As I
Should he
remember,
have it? Should he
the
have it? Should he have a different speedometer cable then if he's got put the gearbox on there with the overdrive unit when it didn't
well,
have it originally?
it may end up that cable's way too long. It may end up like that. And if you don't use the 90-degree drive, you can always send it back. See if you can get the cable onto it without that 90-degree drive.
Okay, we'll check that out. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Bill says, can you explain banjo bolts? Some seem to use washers differently. Some have recesses. What side goes against what? The flat side goes against the flat side. The relieved side of the banjo fitting takes the bolt. So the flat goes against the flat, but the relieved side goes with a bolt. And usually, if you're putting fuel, if you're dealing with fuel banjos, you got the AUC 2141 orange gaskets. Those you drop those in oil first, get them soaked up in oil, and put them on, and crank those banjo bolts down as tight as you can get them. It's okay. Use grease on them if you want. Be able to get them apart maybe a little bit, although they're always going to be washed in some gasoline. And then, there's a banjo bolt on the bottom of the carburetor on the H type that uses a steel fiber right on the bottom of that. And then on the T types, the oil fittings, um, the hose, the pipes that go to the oil filter, those just use copper washers. But again, you get those banjo bolts as tight as you can get them. Oh my gosh, yep. And that usually stops all the leaking. Usually. Hey, we're down to the end of.
Hey, John.
No, yes, David.
Sorry. Banjo bolts. I've done a lot of fuel pump replacements.
Okay.
And the ones that you buy now, the brand new ones, I don't know if the old ones were like this or
No,
not.
they weren't. They weren't.
But
They've got that little O-ring in them now.
The O-rings, right? The O-rings. you have to use the banjo bolts with the flat sides. You can't use the ones with the recess because
Right.
the O-ring would see. And I've bought so many of them by accident, not knowing that I bought the wrong one.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
frequently the sellers aren't clear about what it is that
They don't know what they're selling either. So
true.
Yep.
All right. That's it. Just thought I'd mention that.
Okay. All right. So John Lind is restoring a 72 midget today after cleaning out the trunk. Of course, I saw dropping the gas tank. I saw a plastic T-fitting mounted up on the passenger side bulkhead. Never noticed it before. To the left of the fittings, a single small diameter black hose entering and the hose seems to have been cut because it's too short to fit on the fitting. Anyway, what's going on here? So there's a little T fitting on the bees and the midgets in the boot, and the bottom side of that gets a hose, and that goes to the little nipple on the solenoid on the fuel pump, because the fuel pumps are always inhaling and exhaling, and they want one end of that to be up where it's dry, which is in the trunk. Only once did I see the diaphragm in a fuel pump fail and fill the trunk with gasoline. I did see that once, but only once. It's a nice way to keep the inside of the solenoid, the electrical part of the fuel pump, dry. So that's what that's for. Yep, and that's what somebody else wrote here. So Marty's been answering every single thing on here. Phil Barrage, also on my 74B, the windshield washer bag is shot. I bought one. Did I buy one with a cap, the two-door? Those are really pretty. The little translucent ones in the blue housing, not original. So
That's the breather.
so now we're going to just a moment here. We are going to just a moment trying to get this thing to, oh, please, there we go. Look at your radiator. Ben is should suggest me look at your radiator. Support. Oh, if you got two holes by the cooler, the washer bottle can go onto there very easily. Henry says, dang, I replaced the overdrive and did not replace the fourth gear lockout switch. Now I need a new switch. Oh my gosh, that is so frustrating when that happens. My Nico says my clutch shudders badly when I'm releasing in low gear. Only happens when the car is hot. Wish I could tell you it was something other than the clutch between the engine and gearbox.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's what I suspected actually, but I was kind of hoping you'd tell me something else.
Kind of hoping. Yeah.
Now, would that be caused by the flywheel not being flat?
No, there's if you when you get the clutch disc off, there's a ring of springs around in the clutch disc that separate the middle from the outside. So the clamping is done, the pressure plate and the flywheel clamp the outside of the clutch disc. The inside of the clutch disc is what drives the gearbox. And there's some springs in there to just give it a little bit of give when you let the clutch out. Minis don't have that. There's not enough room for it. And that's why their clutches are harsher.
Okay.
And once those springs go bad, then it just shudders. So,
Right.
yeah.
Oh, because it only does it when it warms up. When it's cold, it's fine. And then as soon as it gets warm, it starts to shudder. But all other changes up and down are really good. So,
Yeah, you can suffer it probably for a while too. You
well,
know,
yeah, did it most half of last season. So,
yeah, T T types shudder so badly sometimes you can barely drive them in first or reverse because they're geared so low, and they don't have a throttle cable. They got a throttle rod, and the engines end up moving back and forth as you're loading it and unloading it, and then therefore the position of the throttle changes each time the engine moves. Oh my gosh, You cannot keep them from going in first or reverse. Horrible. You haven't got that kind of problem because you got a B, but anyway, yep. And Ian says he's got the same thing on his 66B. So, yep. Let's
Yeah, it's
see.
been a problem for a while now. It's going to be another thing I fix on that eventual clutch job.
Let's see. John Lynn says that he's on the 72 midget. Oh, I'm back to the same place. All right, I'm down to the end here. It's 9:16. So it's now we're going to pretend like it's open line Friday. And if you've got anything else that I don't know, you didn't know how to raise your hand, some comment on anything we've talked about tonight.
John, banjos?
Yes.
Sorry, me again, but just talking about banjos, I had an issue last year in the MGA with the H4 carburetors. We were out doing some touring, and I looked under my bonnet, and the breather on top of the rear carburetor's got the bolt that holds the lid onto the float bowl. The bolt had dropped off, and the breathers to the banjo had dropped off as well, and I had the float bowl lid just bouncing around with the float in the carburetor. We were touring through the Pyrenees, which was lovely, but it's a long way from any MG parts, so we just had to use some tape and some cable ties to hold it all together. But once I'd spoken to a few people about that, and I was amazed how common it was. People saying their float bowl lid bolts on H4s coming loose. Is there, apart from drilling the top of the head of the bolt and putting a wire through, is there a good way to try and keep
get it tight, get it tighter next time? So
I was just thinking when you talked earlier, the fiber washers, soaking them in oil. Maybe if I soak the fiber washers in oil, that would actually help tighten them down.
Could, yeah. Anything you can get in there to reduce, when you're looking at torque, and you're putting a wrench on something, there are three different things going on. One is the stretching the bolt or collapsing the washer. One is the friction between the threads, and the other is the friction between whatever you're turning against. And it's about 30-30-30, or third. If you can get those threads oiled up and put some grease on them, anything like that, anything to crank that bugger tighter. Yeah, I've had the float bowl come off on my MGA. Absolutely, yeah.
I have a quick field fix for that missing banjo bolt on the carburetor.
Yeah, Barney.
Yep. Sure, Barney.
I lost that fitting on my car recently. What you do is you put some flat washers on there and one or two fiber washers, and you grab a dikes and you cut the little notch out of one side of the fiber washers so they could vent the float chamber outside the fiber washers. But you do have to have the nut, the banjo nut that goes on top there.
You could use a pair of vice grips. Just clamp it on. Hey, when you're out in the middle of nowhere, in the Pyrenees or in the outback, like whenever you took a Holden out into the interior, you always took gum and so you could fix a hole in the gas tank.
Hey, John,
you'd be
real
amazed.
quick.
Sorry, at the same time, one of the other guys in an MGA as well, his banjo bolt fell out going down a hill, and he's wondering why his car wasn't kept stalling. And we got to a safe place to pull over, and he opened his bonnet. His banjo bolt had dropped out. Somebody went back up the road a couple of miles and actually found the banjo bolt lying in the middle of the road.
No.
How lucky was?
How lucky
nobody
is
had a spare banjo bolt.
How lucky is that?
Straight onto the exhaust.
Judd, I had the same thing on the T. The rear carburetor, the bottom banjo bolt fell out because all the fuel ran out. Car stopped, and the dead blade bolt and the washer were sitting on the frame of the car underneath the carburetor. I didn't have to go back up the road. We screwed them back in and ran like a champ. But I mean, talk about somebody was looking out for me on that one.
Well, I couldn't believe I lost my breather pipe, because you know how long those breather pipes are from the top of the float bowl. I would have thought that would have got caught up in the chassis somewhere, but that was nowhere to be found, unfortunately. And a couple of days later, a guy with a TD lent me a a breather and a float bolt to get me going, and I sent him back another one later on, which was very handy, because I was a bit worried about driving with just the cable ties and the tape holding it together and fuel potentially coming out everywhere on the exhaust.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
thank you.
Okay, I think we run about through the whole subject here. I wrote an article, must have been 20 years ago. Zizzes, tunks, I don't know, tunks, clunks, and dings. All
It's
the
on our
different,
website.
okay, all the different noises that you
Noises.
might have from out of your car. And because when I'm fielding calls, I'll say, well, the guy says, oh, my car's making a funny sound. I said, like what? And nobody will go or ding, ding, ding or anything. They try to describe it in words. It's like, no, dude, just make the make the noise. So I have we lose less in translation. But every single clunk, every single ding, cling, jingle, they all mean different things. Maybe we should do a video on one of those sometime.
The click and clack guys would do it every Sunday morning on Car Talk.
Which
It
one of
was
those
awesome.
guys had the TD? One of them had a TD.
Black.
Okay.
Yeah. The crazy one.
They're both crazy. It's hard to define.
Well, if you got one that's got a TD, you know which one's crazy.
Okay. All right.
John?
Yes.
How
Brian.
do you remove
Brad.
the banjo bolt, brass banjo bolt that's stuck in the aluminum float ball cap?
You have the football cap and the banjo bolt out on the out on the bench, and there's no gasoline left in it. You take your propane torch.
Propane torch,
You heat
okay.
that cap for a minute, and then plunge it onto a 5-gallon pail of cold water, and it'll unscrew by hand.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay. Oh, Marty's already got it up. Sounds of zizzes, clunks, rattles, and ticks.
Hey, John, I think Henry has his hand up there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yes, sir. Sorry.
Hi, I just wanted to revisit the overdrive lockout switch issue.
Yes.
I'm hoping I can disconnect the drive shaft or maybe unscrew the removable cross member and be able to swing the transmission tail far enough around to get something up there to unscrew the
Well, yeah, you can knock the cross member loose and let it all hang there, and use a 2x4 and wedge it down in there and move it, I think, over to the right-hand side so somebody can get up from the left side underneath and reach that switch. It's a real coarse thread. It's a metric 2.0 thread, so all you have to do is barely turn it and then it'll unscrew. But the proper way, the way that we used to do it was drop the drive shaft, drop the center and rear exhaust, wire them up. You couldn't just let them dangle. Then drop the cross member, the rear cross member. And this is after you got the inside of the car apart, the carpet peeled back and the console out of the way, and the elliptical plate there, so you can get down in there and reach it. It's a bugger.
I tried to unfasten the elliptical plate. It seemed like it was gonna like bugger it up by prying it off. So I abandoned that approach.
So that's what I used to do, drop, because the ass end of the car won't come down far enough because of the drive shaft, and then it's stressing the exhaust because it's sitting on an angle. So you want to have the whole exhaust, so the whole exhaust comes down a little bit, and the drive shaft out of the way, and then it's easy at that point, easy schmeezy.